Good morning, everybody. And once again, I'm continuing with my series of interviews of people that I find really interesting. And we've got a new series called The Panel, and we're always going to have different people on it, and we're also going to have individuals. And today, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Senta Knapp.
Yeah. Hello, Joel.
Hi,
Nice to see you this morning.
I'm actually, it's cold here, and
Yes.
you look like you're dressed for spring.
Yes, I'm in Auckland, New Zealand, and yeah, we've definitely had a turn in the weather, so spring is coming.
Woohoo! Let it come to the South Island, and I just love how we coordinated. So, Senta, all those years ago, how I met you, I think I let the audience know how we actually met. So, we were both immigrants to New Zealand, and we both moved to a little village called Howick in Auckland. When did you actually arrive?
Oh, it's now 27 years ago about, so that was 1994.
Okay,
We've been in New Zealand for a little while already.
Yeah, we arrived in 87.
Yeah.
And then I met a lady called Glenda Pellew from Auckland, an incredible medium.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you meet her?
Oh, I can't even remember. Yeah.
Well, she was the catalyst for our meeting, which was quite interesting. So at the time, I had then moved from Howick to St. Heliers, and you were still in Howick.
Mm.
And I took a book out of the library called The Book of Enoch. And the lady at the library said, wow, nobody's taken this book out of the library since 1962. And I had let Glenda know that I was reading it, and I was quite fascinated with Enoch's visions of the crystal cities and everything where he had been, where he was going in these visions that he had. And then Glenda said to me, oh, there's a girl, and she's also South African, and she's also reading the Book of Enoch. And then I phoned you because I was so excited. I thought, what are the chances? And you said, no, it's the Keys of Enoch. So what were you doing? How did you even begin to start studying or reading the Keys of Enoch at that time?
Yeah, that is.
You want to go all the way back to the beginning?
We have to go all the way back. And I guess just to explain something in terms of my inner journey. So I was born in South Africa in a very, very rural area. So really kind of like the outback of Australia. If you've got that in mind, that is my upbringing. No shoes, lots of animals, horses, and big open spaces. And I could remember being born. I can remember the time before I was born. But, we don't know this when we are young. I just always assumed that everybody could remember. And I used to tell people. And then I stopped telling people because they looked at me weirdly. So I guess sometimes these spiritual journeys that are really within our memories, and that is what I was told, is that my memories will reawaken. So the memory that I had of before being born was really being surrounded by a circle of beings. But it wasn't so much the faces of the beings that I remember. It is more the actual vibration or the feeling in that place. And they gave me a golden orb, and they said, basically, there was a conversation. They said, is she going to be okay? And somebody said, she has her memories and they will guide her. And with that, somebody touched me on my chest, and I literally fell backwards. And I just felt this like restriction being wrapped around me as I was actually born. So I didn't give all of this too much thought, kind of progressed to university and then suddenly I thought, there was a lot of, in South Africa, there was a lot of conflict, a lot of spiritual battles between the churches and all. And I thought, I wonder if I could find this place. And this was when I was in my early 20s, that resonates in the same way as this feeling that I had before I was born, because I always felt it's not right. It doesn't fit with me. So I started going to literally any spiritual and every spiritual show that was being held. I went to the Theosophical Society, I went to the Spiritualist, I went to the Catholics, I was completely open. All I wanted to see is, was there somebody else? Would I find this feeling? And I came to the conclusion that the feeling was not there, that this doesn't exist, and perhaps that this memory was all just it was just an illusion. It wasn't really true. And I said at that point, I said, if this is true, there's only one way I can find it, and that is it will have to be revealed to me, but I will listen. And in that moment, it was like that I surrendered the external parameters of life, trying to find it externally. It was like my consciousness was elevated. And I went into an experience of literally where I could not have I could not move an eyelid. I could hardly breathe. It was like my body was nearly like frozen, but in such a deep field of love. And I just heard the words, tomorrow you will meet the people that will teach you. So the next day I did meet with a group and there were basically 8 scholars, and the most—
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
Those people that you met the next day, the very next day, how did you meet them? Was it already set up? Because that's interesting.
Yeah. So I saw a little notice of a meditation group that was going to meet in some type of journal that I was paging through. And when I called them, they basically said, "Hi, we're waiting for your call." And that is how I met them. But I was only about 22 at that stage, and there were a group of 8 of them, and they were all either psychiatrists, doctors, or all in the medical field, and they were specifically interested in reading ancient scriptures and understanding the awakening process, the journey of consciousness, and what does the role of consciousness play in healing. And when I walked into the group, I recognized the feeling. I only recognized the pattern, and I knew I had found the same vibration, or that the vibration that I remember from before I was born was anchoring in this group. But being really young, I did not understand a word they were talking about. I literally did not. The language was something else. And but I was told that they were my first teachers, and they held a space for me, and they answered my questions, and they were very, very patient with me. And in this, I basically, was able to draw on a very, very big foundation of knowledge, and also was taught how to read ancient scriptures. The group then was told that they would connect with somebody. And this is how Dr. Hertek, that was quite, kind of like after, just when Dr. Hertek started coming to South Africa. And
interrupt you again. Could you please let people know who Dr. Hertek is? Because many don't know.
Yeah. So Dr. Hertek had a experience where he was taken off the planet, and he runs an organization called the Academy for Future Science. So, and this was really the early days. He just had his experience, and he was writing what he'd been gifted, the insights that he'd been gifted or they were coded into him, and he was bringing this through. So he is the author of the Keys of Enoch, and he pretty much dedicated the rest of his life to be able to, bring this knowledge, the source of knowledge. And it is called the Academy for Future Science because it explains the science of consciousness, which is really a vibrational science, and which is it is a holding for many, many other disciplines will grow into this knowledge. because it really is the fundamental knowledge.
Like the foundation.
The foundation, yeah. Yeah. But in terms of my journey,
sorry, so he arrived then, this group brought him to South Africa?
Yes, they did, yes.
And you met him?
Yes, I met him. And the first time that he taught, or that we went on a retreat together, he kept us up till like 3, 4 in the morning because he didn't sleep. We needed to sleep. He said, no, now the time is really ready to work. So, yeah. But like anything, others can hold this information for you and hold a safe space for you to grow. But in terms of my own maturity, I still needed to also step into my own inner knowing and my own inner guidance. I got married, and my husband and myself, we moved to New Zealand and to basically start a family. I am German originally, and I remember we're sitting and saying, so, you know, if we're going to start a family, where are we going to go? Are we going to go back to Germany, or should we try somewhere else? And we saw this copybook with beautiful pictures of New Zealand. I said, that's very pretty. Well, why don't we go there? So we packed our bags and we went. That is like, we hadn't seen New Zealand before, and we soon realized that all those beautiful pictures were taken on sunny days, not on the rainy days. But it's a lovely country, and we have settled here. And yeah, so coming to New Zealand, I did not have a support network as such, and which really meant, I think, as a woman, and you know, as a teenager, you know, like I was still young, I needed to grow up, and it was a very busy time looking after the children and just kind of settling in and working. So at that stage, I used to work in the advertising industry, and I was a business strategist, and I used to look at campaigns and write the strategic direction and assess campaigns in terms of their successfulness. And when I had my children, I just had this deep, deep yearning that this journey of preparation was to come to an end, and I wanted to go into an area of service. So while at home with the children, I requalified as a counselor and started putting the preparation in place for actually starting to work in mental health and the consciousness sciences, which is really the inner being rather than the outer parameters of life. I had many deep, deep questions, and one of the big questions that I held and that I really battled with was, if I have this memory of this place and I have connected with this feeling and I know myself in a different level of experience, but on a day-to-day, I couldn't hold that. It wasn't, there were a lot of fluctuations. It wasn't like it was a static experience, it was a once-off. And it kind of, I know in terms of what my potential for holding was, in terms of lovingness, in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of extensiveness. But on my day-to-day, the journey, the emotional journey was quite jarring. And this was kind of an inner tension that was playing itself out in my psyche. And so I was actually, I guess the deeper the questions and the further pull between my actual experience and what I knew I could hold, it was so far apart that it actually was a despair within myself, a great sadness that I had lost, perhaps that I'd lost myself. So this huge tension was actually in my being. And I've kind of said, well, I would not just because of the type of person that I am, I would not, and the experience that I've had trying to find the answers within organizations from other people, it wasn't never quite correct. But I also knew that if I posed questions within myself, and at this stage there was a real need for support, that the answers would eventually come. But everybody talks about the day that changed your life forever, and most people imagine something really big. The day that changed my life forever was just a kind of like a bit of an afternoon chat with the girls.
Always the best way.
Chatting. I had my 2 little children, and we were having an afternoon tea, and there were lots of women around, and I was having a very good time. And I was sitting in this group of women, and I had a piece of paper in my hand, and I was holding a pen, and I was just scribbling. I was not thinking at all, engaged in the conversation. And all of a sudden, something in the room changed. And it was like there was deathly silence, or it was like my hair stood on end. It was like, oh God, what has just happened? And I looked down, and I had drawn a perfectly proportioned picture of a mother and a child. And I just got the words, the universe is infinitely nurturing. And I want to repeat the statement because it is very important. It said, the message I got was that the universe is infinitely nurturing. And my first response was bullshit. But anyway, as this experience was happened, everybody kind of just started packing up and went home. I thought it was very strange. It's had time for myself. And I will just quickly flick to a different screen, because I think that it's important that you see this very first picture that I ever drew.
Expressing to you that the universe is infinitely nurturing.
Nurturing, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go to share screen, and I'm going to show you this picture. So what you see here is really, you can see the free movement of my pencil that I was holding. But you can see that there was no coincidence. This is not a picture that was, this is a real image. The proportions are perfect in terms of the feeling. And I think in all of these pictures, the feeling that emanates from them is really one of in tremendous care, just like a mother would hold a child. So gentle, so nurturing. And look how safe the child feels within the mother's arms. Totally safe, top to bottom.
Protected.
And protected.
So you got the image first and just came through you and then was supported by the words.
Exactly. And this was quite amazing in terms of this process, because it continues like that. I did not formulate the answer in my mind. I had a need, and that need filled my body so fully. And the need was one of understanding. I understood things from here. I was starting to feel things, but I didn't really have that connection through to my own guiding principle. At the time that this picture came, I was doing my counseling studies. And I mean, in terms of the counseling, the focus was very much on the personality. And this type of experience could not really be accommodated within that very philosophical framework, because it was too limiting. I mean, this would immediately have been seen as this is a fracture or somebody who is splitting. So something is coming through. So there was a lot of questioning around the process, and I didn't talk to anybody about it because I didn't want to dilute it, because the feeling that was associated with this picture was some of such wholeness, like it was where I'd come from. And I didn't want everybody else to have a say at this point because it was a new experience for me. So what also needs to be said here, what I also very soon realized, I was aware that, people say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And often people think it's an external teacher, but it's not. I was very aware that this information was something that I did not embody. I was born and raised in South Africa. Things in South Africa were never safe. There's huge suffering. There is huge poverty. Safety in terms, people die from starvation. This is about as far a belief within that. This is not something that I hold in my day-to-day consciousness.
Of being infinitely nurturing.
Exactly. So I knew that this was
Should we
not...
get you back onto the main screen?
Yeah.
There we go. So they can see you.
Okay. Do I need to go onto...
Back to you.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
All
go.
right. Yeah.
Okay, so you came from a dangerous background. The mother and the child and the infinitely nurturing universe is not something that you held within your framework as such.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't hold that at all. I thought life is very dangerous. And I mean dangerous.
Because that was your experience.
That was my experience. Life was dangerous for me in South Africa on many levels. First of all, I didn't think like everybody else. Yeah. My father was a political activist. I knew more than most, He was very involved in politics. And as a child, of course, you listen to conversations. And I knew life wasn't really safe. And at a deeper level, you saw many people that were really, really starving. So this shift of my experience of life versus a different level of seeing life, there was a gap here. And so I understood that there was a deeper level of understanding that I needed to assimilate. And I also understood that this deeper level of understanding was not personal, it was impersonal. It is really
Explain to people what you mean by that.
Yeah. This is really the understanding of the evolutionary process. It is really the understanding of the principles out of which we are birthed as personal beings. So we have a personal experience, but there's a tension between the personal experiences and what we assimilate on a deeper level eventually, which is really the consciousness of why the experience even comes forward.
So that's the evolution of your consciousness through the
Very
experience.
much so. Yeah.
Right?
So within myself, a shift started happening from looking at my day-to-day experiences to kind of looking at what is actually the thought form that is bringing this experience forward. So if I dissolve, if I can assimilate this thought form in my being, these experiences will no longer be. Okay. So just stepping it down into a different level. And
so almost being conscious of your consciousness.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then being like a master of the consciousness. And it's almost like you watching yourself as a specimen in a laboratory.
Oh, very much so.
Am I right?
Yes, very much.
That's the feeling I'm getting from you.
Yeah.
Is that you were actually able to then have that experience, sit back and say, what on earth happened? How is that possible? Because this is not how I've felt before. So it's opened up this whole new process for you. And you were able to actually observe yourself going through a process of evolving.
Yeah. I think you've really nailed it. So the next thing, in terms of if the universe is infinitely nurturing, I mean, my next question was, as I said, bullshit. You
Tell that to all the starving people in Africa.
Exactly. Yep. You better explain this to me in a way that I can understand it. So, because I don't really understand. And as I said, I did not share this with anybody just because I thought I was just not ready to do that at that point. There was just too much going on, and I thought it was better to just keep it close to my heart at that stage. So not thinking that let's see if I could get the next answer. So my next question was really, so explain this to me, an infinitely nurturing universe and what is happening here on Earth. And so
because the words didn't seem to make sense to what you were physically seeing with your human eyes.
Yeah, so I had a very definite question, a very clear question. And I said, I'll wait till I'm ready. And all of a sudden, within a few days, it was actually weeks. This entire process was very, very slow because it always took me a long time to formulate my next question. But this was my next question. So, and I think it was a few weeks, can't quite remember later, I had this absolute urge that I needed to draw again. And that, something was happening. And I felt really restless and I was looking for a piece of paper. But then I thought, I've got such a strong mind because I'm quite can I say, a strong individual. I had quite a strong personality. I thought I better not let my personality interfere. So I basically blindfolded myself and I put my hands on a piece of paper and I held my pen. And then I got my next picture. And blindfolded, yeah. And again, this
because you had to prove to yourself.
Yes.
That it was coming from somewhere else and not you, personality.
Yes, very much so. Okay. I needed to see.
You needed black and white proof.
Absolutely. And I think that is just because that is just my nature. So sometimes some people can accept things, but I guess from my background where I had seen so much deceit, so much manipulation, so much false understanding.
You needed to be pure.
It needed to be pure and it needed to be directly through me. So I didn't want it to come through an organization. I wouldn't accept kind of another's interpretation. I had to feel it really in my bones. Where does this sit for me? Yeah. So I'm just going to flick to the next picture that came because
the blindfolded
picture. And you will see that I have colored this in. So what I started doing is my impulse was really that some of these pictures were icons and I needed to really put time into to using to just drawing them and coloring them in. So you'll see that from now on the pictures are kind of painted and over time the pictures become a lot better. Again, everything is a process and we just have to start somewhere. So this is one of my early pictures and I'm just going to go to the share screen. A picture of myself painting. I found an art teacher and she was an icon artist and she supported me with some of the techniques to be able to work this.
Wow. You did that blindfolded?
No. Okay, this is not the blindfolded picture. This is actually a later one. The blindfolded one is coming now.
Okay.
So
explain to me this picture.
Yeah, let me just touch base very quickly because I was later told that the capstone knowledge needs to be returned. So this is a slightly later picture, but and you can see kind of the detail of the drawings and what was coming through. And these are really pictograms. They are not there for visual understanding only, but they're nearly like whole thoughts that contain a feeling and that contain a full circle of information. Everything is symbolic, you know, every shape is symbolic, every color is symbolic, and everything is precise. As I was coloring in the pictures, if it wasn't quite ready or it wasn't completely done, I would just feel restless. And then I had to keep going till it was suddenly it said, the process is done. It's finished. So this is the older picture that I referred to, which came as an answer to the question, the universe is infinitely nurturing. Now, I don't know if you would like me to explain it a little bit.
Yes, just tell them from, it looks like coming in, spirit coming in through conception, incubation.
Yeah. So what I was shown is really, and each picture was a bit of a process. So just to explain this picture, if you look at the background, I was shown that this is really all the consciousness in the world that was ever created. And this consciousness, that basically we as human beings are free to create in whatever way we are, because the pathway of this consciousness to be redeemed exists already. So as humans, we can create, and there's a ceiling to where it's contained, because we can be free in our creation, because we have to witness our own creation to be able to get that feedback. But the pathway for that consciousness form of creation to be released already exists. So what we have in this picture is we have a bright light entering that consciousness, and through that it triggers the spiral of life. So the pure connection, the pure thought form, the pure energy strikes this consciousness, and what we see is really the spiral of life being born. Now, I go into quite a lot of detail in terms of the different stages that we go through on this journey. But if you look at the picture and you start with the dark forms, the ones that are just kind of etheric beings, we see that our consciousness kind of gets formed from, hasn't completely, it is just vague. We're just an extension of what happens around us. And then we go around in a cycle towards the center, where we actually become clearer of who we are. Moving down to the bottom, we see angels guarding people that are asleep. And this symbolically represents the basically higher beings guarding us, because we already contain the core of the release consciousness in ourselves. We're actually precious already at this stage. But this is a long journey that takes us back into the darkness several times, of cycles of awakening and reawakening, till we eventually come to the center. And in the center, we have the symbol of the two hands that come together. Now, this is symbolic of the masculine and the feminine aspect of our psyche being purified. And as we do that, we hold a sacred space within ourselves. So the consciousness of our sacred being, our light being, is able to connect consciously again within our hearts. And through that, we have a direct channel, so to say, to the higher aspects of ourselves. And as you see, once that happens, our journey no longer engages duality. We actually awaken and we stay within that inner sanctum. Yeah?
Yeah.
So these are, I will just very, very quickly flick through a few more pictures just to give you a sense of some of the other pictures. Now there are 52 pictures in total. Most of those I have written about in a book, also talking about the messages that are received with each of these pictures. And the book is really about the evolution of consciousness. It looks at the different stages that we go through. So another example of this picture is really this one which shows the different stages of our development, and it in itself, needs to be presented. And, there is so much in this picture. So as I was drawing the pictures, the information came to me. And as I was working with the pictures, more information came to me. But at the same time, while I was drawing, I was stilling my mind. I was stilling my nervous system. I was stilling my heart. I was just enjoying myself. And very slowly, these truths were becoming part of my vibratory structure. They were becoming part of my body. And, that is really the purpose of these pictures. They were really my way of healing.
They were using your physical body as a channel.
Yes.
And
yes.
the channeled information was coming through in a pictogram form.
Yes.
And then you got the information of what they actually meant as well. So what you've given the listeners today is a whole journey. And you've written the book, The Visionary Pictograms.
Yes.
And so all these images they can see in that book, as well as all the explanation of it. And it's almost like the unfolding of yourself, but it's a message for humanity.
Yes.
That they too can have a journey of self-discovery and evolution when they do go within. Because they've got to have to start asking the questions. And I've just realized when you were talking, Senta, is that you said you would formulate a question and maybe it would take you a week to actually get the right question. So it's once again, it's popcorn questions or casserole questions. If you ask the popcorn question, you're going to get the light and fluffy substance back.
Yeah.
If you take the time to formulate what's important to you, then you're going to get something like this that you've got on our screen, which is so deeply nourishing and fulfilling. So thank you for that in itself. That's also a beautiful, beautiful way for people to understand that what they ask is what they're going to receive.
Yes. So, and I think, you've really, the universe responds when there's a need. If it's just from the mind, it's not going to respond. If it's just an intellectual pursuit, it's not going to respond.
Yeah.
It's a real soul question that really vibrates and that really bothers you and that you're really battling with and that you really want to engage with. The answers come. And don't let go of how the answers come. I mean, how could I have imagined that these answers would come to me in this way?
No.
Never.
Not sitting chatting to ladies at a TV.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I will just show you three more pictures, I think it is. And then just to give you a bit of a feel of how it continued. So this kind of shows that this picture shows basically a couple in the bubble, like our human experience. And then it shows supernature. Okay. And basically, I was told that our cells remember where we need to go. And this journey is as instinctive as anything. But if we are able to name it, the tensioning mechanisms within ourselves, if I'm able to name it where this journey is actually drawing with me, if I have the context, if I understand what life is all about at a very deep level, it makes it very easy for me to engage with this. Because just like, sorry to say that, but nobody even needed to teach you, how to have sex, all right? The universe is a creative process. You don't need to be taught. It awakens in you. And you suddenly, when you are ready, you suddenly know where you need to go next.
So I want to ask you a question before. Do you want to go back to that, the other one, if you're able to?
Yeah.
Why those particular colors? Did the colors mean anything, or were they just instinctive?
The colors are all very instinctive, and I guess the distinction here is really kind of, the alchemy of the masculine and the feminine. Now you see that that the circle always represents the soul versus the personality. So what this picture actually points at here is not so much the physical act of co-creation. It is saying that the soul aspect of a masculine and feminine aspect within your being are being purified and are starting to talk to each other. They're becoming one unit. And so doing, the circle becomes under the influence of supernature, which is the bigger currents of the universal process, not the personal process. Okay, so what we're seeing here, there are different links. It's the link between the personal to the soul process, which is kind of more on a global level, but then the global process that is beyond the earth gets linked to the universal process. And the universal process has always got to do with the universe, which is billions of stars, planets, and who knows what else. It is the energy, a universal energy. It's a bigger current than a localized current.
So it's showing you're part of the universe and you are endless possibilities.
Yes.
And it's a circle and a cycle and a cycle and a cycle.
Yeah. And it basically also says all of these paintings are around the process. If you stay in the process and if you understand the process, and the process always means that we are letting go of form to become formlessness. But it takes courage to step into formlessness. And it's a kind of a yo-yo effect. You sometimes have to step into formlessness, and then you have to step out of it to be able to assimilate the new understanding. Otherwise, it becomes too unsafe.
So if you actually were formless when you arrived and became form,
yeah,
you have the ability to flick backwards and forwards.
Exactly.
When you remember that you can.
Yeah.
And that's where your knowledge is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your pot of gold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So the next picture is a question around healing. And again, this is very appropriate that we have the discussion around form and formlessness, because at this stage I was working as a therapist, and I was becoming very observant that what was happening in the room, and that it wasn't always in my control. As a matter of fact, the less I did, actually, the more observant I became, the more astonished I became in terms of what was transpiring.
Yes.
And so I asked, so what is healing? What does the word healing really mean? And first of all, no man can heal another. Healing is the process of you transitioning and growing into the soul energy, first of all, recognizing the deeper aspect of yourself. And ultimately, healing is the release of your consciousness from this mortal coil of carnation and reincarnation.
Love it.
Okay?
Love it.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example.
Yeah. So interesting, if you look at this picture, you have nearly like a person in the center lying, and she's been wrapped in a big piece of material, so nearly half asleep, and her consciousness being connected to her soul creative essence from where she comes, her light body, which is between the two pillars. It's being held. It has personal form. It is being held between two pillars. It is in creation, but it's not in physical substance. It's in the subtle realms. Okay, and we have around this person lying in the middle, we have wisdom represented by the hawk, and we have a very masculine warrior energy. We have gold, we have golden masks, we have lesser beings in the background, we have a rose in the front, and we even have a dog, like a guider. They're guiding, it looks like an Egyptian dog in the left-hand corner. So what was profound for me at that stage was to realize that I even had to surrender my own knowing, my own higher understanding of things. I had to become completely an empty vessel. The water of my creation, of my inner soul, had to become completely still. So still that no storm would ripple the waters anymore. It became just, and what do we know about waters that are very, very still? They reflect the light beautifully and accurately. And that is really, the deeper journey of awakening. Water's always got to do with emotional energies. So our emotional being starts to become inclusive, extensive. It knows at its very core, it doesn't have to engage anymore because it's being held and everything is in order, Life is playing itself out in such a way that humanity can see the impact of their own creation. If we don't have that feedback loop, how are we ever going to learn?
Yeah.
All right.
Isn't it amazing that Earth is an emotional plane, an emotional planet, and we are made of so much water?
Yeah.
As a being, which holds those emotions that then get reflected, and that's what water does.
Yes.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a beautiful mirror. So I have one more here, and this has to do with our relationship to time, that we have really do no longer understand the inner house of our inner being. And if you look carefully at this picture, you have a house with a roof, and it's got 3 levels in it. It's a personality, a soul, and a spirit, all right? But in form. And we have a different level on top, a trinity within trinity. So there is different types of time. There's consciousness time, there's linear time, and there's universal time. They're different matters. They're different. They each hold a different challenge to our being. We have to start to re-engage with universal time because it is the cause, it is the context into which we evolve. It is a context that will help people make sense of what's happening here on planet Earth at this time. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, this is, again, we have a circle. So we know that this is about the soul. And what we're seeing here is 2 men in tremendous battle with themselves. So the soul is still a personal aspect. And we have the higher aspects of the soul and the lower aspects. And it's still in itself, it's still an evolving vehicle. And these principles, it's more refined than a personality. This is more a battle of principles and principalities. So the higher and the lower. And what we see is that through this intense battle, and if you just look into that picture and you feel that intense energy of the higher and the lower within ourselves at war with each other, but that within this battle, the man is reaching out and he's taking a sword and he's using his energy to kill his own heart, his human heart. All right. It says death of the human heart. All right. Death of the earthly way of seeing things, completely earthly way of. And what does it do? It births the phoenix. Freedom. Transmutation.
It gives you the freedom to fly when you get rid of the nonsense.
Very much so.
And when you remember who you are.
Yeah. And death of the human heart is often associated. They say that we only ever die one death, and that is the death of the personalities. All other transitions are just gradual transitions into different bodies of light. But the death of the personality, so this is more the death of our human way of seeing things, to be able to hold ourselves open to the basically transformative energy which is here on this planet.
So that picture is about transformation, the process of transformation.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Now,
oh, the lion's portal.
Every every sacred writing points to spiritual consciousness. I asked the question in terms of humanity. So what is humanity's shadow? And they say humanity's shadow is everything that we do not identify as being part of the evolutionary process. So what does that mean? I mean, the shadow just means things that we're not willing to see about ourselves. And I was shown that we, in terms of humanity at this point, we are comfortable with a vision of a dove, but we've forgotten the vision of a hawk and the vision of a phoenix. We have lost that wisdom, but the three need to be present because they are one process. So the process can't be complete if we only identify with part of it. We have to identify with all of it because we're only one being, and there can only be one law operating in our body at all times. And that law is embodied in this picture, often associated with the higher spiritual realms and with the higher beings of light, with the Trinity process. But the Trinity process incarnates, and we have to understand its role at every level of that process. So if we cut the process short, it is a little bit like sometimes we see in a therapy, we might have somebody who is very identified with the spiritual, but really does not enjoy life. You know, they do not know where they are going within life. You know, they haven't embodied it yet. So every part needs to take its rightful place. You can't only identify with one part because then the process will not be complete. There's much more to this picture, to all of these big pictures.
Wow.
And there are many, many more. But the journey, the message is really one of humanity's reaching a critical point. Big transitions are possible. These big transitions will happen very quickly. You're not going to be able to hold on to external knowledge anymore, okay? Because that might all fall away. You have to know it within your heart. You have to live that experience, and you have to practice day in, day out. This is where your consciousness needs to reside. Within these realms are so fast. I mean, we are in 3D, 4D reality here most of the time. You do go 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. You will never, there are realms of glory and life beyond human comprehension that we are preparing to engage with individually, but also as a planet. You will not be able to make sense of it if you cannot feel the similitude, if you cannot feel the connection, the inner love, and to the essence of it all, of what is transpiring here on Earth at this time.
So, Senta, you, in the job that you do as a conflict resolution facilitator, family court mediator, healer, what would you say is like a theme that runs through that would make such a difference if people maybe just changed one thing?
Yeah. Pay careful attention to what's going on inside of you. Keep a diary. Be honest with yourself. Look at your thoughts. Your thoughts have creative power. That which you do not want to see about ourselves controls you. You change that within yourself, the way that you engage with life and what you do in your decisions. Nothing is predetermined. There's only possibilities. You know, within a wider concept of time, new possibilities emerge. So use your creative power in an appropriate and wholesome way. Bring yourself into life. Life has much to show you.
So, you know, as you channel your pictures, you channeled your book, you do healings. Do you have international clients with your healing and your counseling work?
Well, in terms of my healing, so I work as a family mediator, mostly with families in crisis. And I love that work because you have to engage on so many different planes. And as I said, when we make these tensions visible, and healing is exactly the same thing. When I work with clients, I will normally start to engage by doing a reading of the field. What does that actually mean? It just means I can get a feeling of the structure of which you draw more on the higher mental, the lower mental, which part of your being is strongest, which ones do you not engage with so much? What do we need to do to bring it into balance? Health is all about balance. So I run a very small clinic in Auckland with a few clients, because I'm also still doing my mediation work. And most of my clients are really at the point where they can actually, they do their own, they know what they need. They just need somebody to stand with them to be able to facilitate the process and make it clearer and, you know, to reflect on, just like you are interviewing me. And in so doing, you are drawing things out of myself in a different way that I would perhaps not normally speak to anybody, because you are listening very carefully. So healing is the same. You know, when somebody comes into your space and they have a burning question, I can assess within the field what it looks like, but we can work together. And often the client already knows. No one healing session is the same. Everyone is completely different. Somewhere you have to look at how people move. Some people kind of travel very easily within themselves and just need to be a bit of guidance and need a bit of feedback in terms of how to do it. So it really depends. As I said, no two sessions are the same. So yeah, it's not so much about the form. I think it is more that the more important part of it is really, where are you coming from at any point in time?
So if somebody's listened to this interview and say they live in San Francisco,
yeah,
and they actually want to connect with you, would you be open to something like that? Yeah. Or are you just keeping yourself to New Zealand?
Yeah, be more than open with that.
Okay. So afterwards, I can leave your contact details so they can actually connect with you.
Yes.
And then you'll be able to tell them, because you have a website, do you still have it, Consciousness?
Yeah, my website is, in terms of, if you want to have a look at my book, and my website is consciousness.co.nz. So NZ being obviously in New Zealand, because that is where I'm based. I also run educational programs in terms of starting to do small workshops, just focusing mostly on the context of evolution, the different bodies, the challenges of different transitions. If you understand the context, it's nearly like you have a roadmap. So if you think in terms of when you are lost in a maze, you don't know where to turn, and you might turn the wrong way. If you had a picture of that maze, looking in from the top down, it is much easier to navigate where you need to turn. So it is nearly like if we have a bit of a roadmap, and even if it's just a mental roadmap and a mental understanding, it can calm us down a little bit. It helps us to engage more with who we are rather than less. It helps us to ask more difficult questions. And all of this is really, you know, we start to meditate, we start to pray, we start to study holy scriptures, because they're all pointing to the same thing. They're pointing to this journey. But it's not enough to just say, I know it exists. We've got to start to actually live it. Because that is our creative contribution in life. And it's personal. What one person does and what another person's drawn to do are very, very, very different. And there's got to be somebody at each level of the transition. Not, you know, everybody's got work to do. That is the capstone knowledge. The higher knowledge needs to be anchored at every level in your being, at every level in society.
So as you were talking earlier, and as you channel through your pictures, I do it in a different way, and I just see like a movie playing.
Yeah.
So I was shown that through the interview as such today, you were going to open up a whole new, what could you call it? I saw you almost like a round table discussion. You know, like Arthur and the knights around the round table in Camelot.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an international discussion that you will hold with invitation process. So if people are interested in something like that, to set up a room for growth, like helping them with their evolution, with their consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's a process. It's a process. And of course, once again, the soul, the process of the soul.
Yeah, yeah. And just like with the drawings, I mean, it took me like 20 odd years to finish my book. The process continues and refines itself constantly, just as your questions change. But I couldn't work in the work that I do, where I really sit sometimes with very discordant energies, if I didn't have this understanding, because I know how to clear myself and I know how to hold a sacred space for people within probably the most wounded states, and supporting families in that way. So yeah, we have to do that for ourselves sometimes, just hold a bit of a sacred space. It's not about how much you do, it's more about how you do it.
Yeah.
You know, this cannot be rushed. These
not a race.
These questions don't move quickly. You know, if I think about my very first drawing, that the universe is infinitely nurturing, it is like my go-to when I go into distress now or try to do too much. I just say, the universe is nurturing and we all have our own wounds. And that is maybe my discernment whether I'm sitting in the right, engaging in the right way. Am I enjoying this? Is it nourishing me or is it depleting me? Is this a balanced approach? So we will achieve much more when we come from that energy. We're not here to amplify the chaos wars and run with every emotional scenario out there, because trust me, there's a higher scenario as well. So why don't we run with the higher scenario? But we are not programmed like that, and that is conscious choice. I am running with the higher scenario, that the best possible outcomes will happen, that it, regardless of how things present themselves, it is the process, just like in healing. Sometimes we can be brought to the edge of death because the body needs to sit there for a while to truly see its own creation. And if it so is the will, the higher will, sometimes miraculous things start to occur. All right. Sometimes things have to get worse first, because otherwise we don't take notice. We think it's all around.
So you get the wound, you don't give attention to the wound.
Yeah.
The wound then has so much pus. And only when it starts getting septic, often then people start paying attention. But then they go, oh, actually, too much hard work, I'll just put a plaster over that. And what they really need to do is rip that plaster off, have a look to see why the pus is there, what took that pus to that stage, get rid of that pus, go back to the bones, and say how wonderful that I've got bones to support it. So at least I've got the bones, so we can start from the bones.
Yeah, and this can be a very scary journey. So, you know, choose somebody to walk with you if that's the way you want to do it. I mean, just be honest with yourself, because at the end of the day, that which we don't want to see, we amplify.
Yeah. Yeah. So if they want to get, if they want to get that visionary pictograms by Senta Knapp,
yeah,
isn't it available on Amazon now?
Yes, it is. It is available on Amazon, and it's also available in a Kindle format. Now, on an ordinary Kindle, which tends to be black and white, of course, the images lose their color, but they're still quite clear.
Yes.
But the Kindle, you can also download it on the computer or something like that to have a closer look at those pictures. Each picture can also be used nearly as a meditation or an activation. As I said, it is a pictogram's purpose is to guide the soul. All right. And it is a whole light form. It is a whole thought form, and it holds an understanding, and it will also hold a memory. And as such, it is really simplistic because you don't have to draw it out into a long string of words. It's just a picture and study it. But why this, or why does it present in that way? And it is a universal language. I mean, if doing this, I understand more and more if I look at the archaeology in the world and in terms of ancient temples, and I look at the sculptures and I look at the position of the people, and I look at the circles and I look at the symbols and I look at the geometry and I understand what story they're telling.
It's like it's archaeology, really.
Yes.
Spiritual archaeology.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this. So, you know, for myself, I think people need to actually get the physical. Because when you open something up and you look at a picture, I mean, to me, it says so much. There's so many different ones that are just incredible that I wouldn't want a Kindle. I need for my own self to feel, touch, and see. But now, Senta, you're evolving. As you know, you're a work of art. So, and you're doing this amazing art, and I know you in your studio there, and you've got new bits that are different now, haven't you? I asked you to bring 2 or 3. Could you show us behind you those pieces of art and how you're going more abstract now?
Yeah. So, you know, and this is where one's just got to start and trust a process. I'm not an artist. I was not trained as an artist. I have sought help as I'm stumbling along. But I'm very drawn to the whole, I mean, you know, images and visionary things is really what fuels me. And so I'm now progressing to really big paintings and laying the foundations, and they're becoming more and more abstract. And every time I do a painting, I'm like, I wonder where this is going to lead. What's going to come out here? But the process of the kind of like the inner journey in terms of the context is complete within the book. You know, there's a completion around this. This is now really the beginning of something new. And, you know, like anything, when you start new, you're not that good at it yet. But back yourself, you know, like, let's just carry on doing what I'm doing. Perhaps something, I want to see what's going to happen. So that's like, you know, you can't force it. It will take you into frustration. And, you know, I know what I like and what I don't like. And sometimes I draw things that I don't like and then I take them away again. So I'll just show you a few of the bigger pictures that I'm now doing. And it's really in preparation for an art exhibition one day. If you can see that.
That looks like some other world planet.
Yeah.
You know, being sort of created in the ethers. Wow. And you could do it the other way. You could turn it upside down. Yes. Oh, you see, they're all so jolly different. Look, those clouds are unbelievable. Yeah, wonderful.
And the final one that is just starting to emerge. It's when you see it's going to be a mother with a child.
Yeah, in the beginning. Yeah, just.
This is just the first layer, and something's starting to happen.
So do you do commissions, or do you just say, no, this is my body of work, and if you want to buy one, you can buy one? Or are you going to put these on your website? Rather just
yes,
first have an exhibition. How are you going to do it, this new process?
I do want to put it on my website, just to show more like a process.
Yeah.
Because every time, I come to a ceiling, and then I have to really work with myself in terms of what I like or what I don't like, just to show how I develop my own process. I mean, at this stage, not quite at the point of commissions or anything like that, but there's a body of work coming, and I can feel it already. And it's more kind of in the line of abstract nature. It is that how our nature eventually opens, it separates, and we start to kind of need to get the feeling that we are being drawn into something beyond. So it all in an abstract way captures that type of energy. So we'll see. We're having fun. We're having fun with it.
So where to from here for Senta? Is it about your teaching? Is it about your interaction? Is it about your art? Is it a combination of everything?
Yeah. My art is my sacred space. So my art is my space to do my inner clearing and my own inner wholesome, enjoyable work. I mean, I really, I find the group process, just understanding the evolution of consciousness and having at least a little bit of a framework. Most people can then engage with their own journey, much better. So I see a lot of my work being around kind of working with groups and actually teaching, just to lay the first level of foundation, how to engage within yourself and why we are doing it, and what why do we even do it, and what is the process. It is really in the ancient scriptures that talk about our image and similitude. It is really, who are you being in the world, and who are you choosing to be in the world? That is where this rests.
Who are you choosing to be in the world?
Yeah.
So many are choosing to be something to appease others in their life. That seems to happen a lot. So would you say that this part of ascension that everybody's talking about, is this the personal ascension?
Yeah.
So that know yourself, know thyself, and by knowing yourself, you will set yourself free. And I'm not, as you know, a biblical type, but I do think it's, as you said before, the questions you ask, and thou shalt receive.
Very much so. Very good. I mean, that's very spot on. If you really want to see something, you slow it down. So look at your life. It's one of a slower. If it comes into form, it is obviously a slower vibration than when it is still in the subtle realms. So so in terms of saying, how do we free ourselves? It's actually a deeply personal journey of stilling our fears and really freeing our consciousness. And what does it mean that we free our consciousness? It just means that we can see ourselves more clearly, and we never fully see ourselves because that is not humanly possible. We see new aspects of the self, and what we see changes over time. But we can also start to resonate more with our consciousness involved to hold ourselves and to hold others. So we can also see others without having to impose our views of life onto others, but knowing that they are divine and walking their path. So really, when we have a close look, if you've got an instinct that you've got to turn left, or you've got an instinct that something always draws you, that you really want to do something, that instinct is probably correct. Address it. It doesn't matter what comes from it, but really the the fast track is look at what's truly within yourself. I don't mind what you tell the world. I mean, just like I never told anybody what was going on with inside of me, just because I wasn't ready. But at least be honest with yourself. Kind of look at really honestly what do you still really fear, and in so doing you can come in relationship with it. Yeah, you can befriend it. It is part of you. It has reason to be there. It's got its own voice. You're not going to abandon any part of yourself. You know, sometimes people can be very frightened of that ascension process because they think they have to abandon themselves. That is not the correct view of it. You're bringing more of yourself to fruition. If it is not grounded in who you are, then you might miss it by a millimeter, and a millimeter over a very long distance takes you very far off the mark.
Yeah. So what would be your parting words to the listeners today? A lot of them are going through very, very difficult times. This has been a rough passage for humanity over the last 2 years. And I'm sure we're not totally out of the woods as such yet. So what form of wisdom, what source of wisdom could you give them, or advice as such, to help them through this passage?
I don't think we're out of the woods, and we will never be out of the woods. Okay? For every problem, the solution already exists. Because the solution will not be found in human consciousness. The solution already exists as a pure etheric form at a different level. Okay? Just like for we have to start to look at what we're putting into those etheric realms, because the divas of this world will act on that. If it's only fear in our domain, fearful scenarios will play themselves out. This is how consciousness works. So, do not believe that one person. This is as I said, there are way showers. There are people that already have the answers. It might yet not have filtered through to common humanity, but as I've always been shown, the universe is nurturing. The answers are already there. So perhaps find your own answer in your little micro world in terms of what keeps you spiritually alive. What do I mean with that? That you don't just feel like a machine, all right? That you actually still laugh, that your spirit still goes, oh, I'm so excited, I'm going to do this today, but you haven't deadened, that there is still, your heart still opens, that you still feel compassion for others and for yourself. These are that you still feel inspired, because every stage of life and every age, there are different contributions, and never believe that your life is worthless. You do not know what point you are holding for others, okay? Just be more who you are. You'll see that all roads eventually lead together, and that the higher purpose has always been there. So don't just see the illness, okay? If you just see your illness within humanity, that is not really true. We are seeing symptoms, we are seeing things that are going wrong, but also know that there's an incredible resilience and that there are forces of light that are operating on this plane that will guide us. So ask where you can contribute. And it might be something very small. You don't have to change the world. It just means that you heal one heart at a time. That's enough.
Yes.
If you didn't do that, who was going to do it? All right. That person was placed in your path. So just look at the smaller steps, what you feel comfortable with. And from a soul perspective, anything that is in balance, sometimes, the person that you are healing will heal you. Okay. Because they're going to open your eyes to things that you perhaps previously have not seen before.
Yeah, I love that, because if there's one thing I've learned in my work is that not everybody is here to be a superstar. And what is a superstar anyway, right? It's what we deem somebody to be a superstar. But the granny that's nurturing her grandchildren could be the most amazing superstar, because without that nurturing, those children are going to be on doing great things. But if she didn't do her job as just being the nurturing, amazing granny, that child, that maybe is all that that child ever needed, is the stability and the balance of the granny to go out and do wonderful things. So I've had people that have said, all you've got to do is now have fun. All you've got to do is be love. You're already being. You don't have to do anything to be. And I was told over the weekend that it is a time really for many to start culling actual people out of their lives that are not fulfilling them, making them happy, dragging them down, and not to worry about it, because nature abhors a vacuum, and it'll be filled with goodness and fabulousness when you release. And it's exactly what you said before about the releasing and then the allowing. So it's an exciting time, you know. We are so fortunate to be having this conversation, because this is not what we would have been speaking about 30 years ago.
Yeah. And I think also in terms of the soul work, you know, often people say, oh, so what's my soul purpose? The soul purpose is most likely linked to the biggest transition that you have to go through. So, if, you know, as I said previously, there are many planes of consciousness, and don't imagine that, you know, at each of these planes there is a guardian or teacher who will help you transition the next plane. Okay. So if I had to look really honestly at my journey, I think my journey has been one always of, I have looked at conflict in great detail. I have worked in it for most of my life, and my journey has really been around religious conflict. That's what I've lived. That's what I lived in South Africa, what I experienced in my family, what I experienced in my community. You know, God is for me, but not for the other. So to be able to transition from external...
Sorry to interrupt you. You're saying that the conflict has been because the people have said God is for them, but not for the other.
Yes. Yeah.
If that other doesn't believe in what they believe as God to be, then God is not for them.
Yes.
So then God is a limiting God, not an all-encompassing God.
Yes. And their God will look after them,
but not the other.
But not necessarily the other. So, and if I mean, again, my journey in terms of, so religious, I talk in my book about religious, the limitation, everybody claims to have the truth. And so I asked, this is one of the questions that I asked in my book. So there's so many religions, and, you know, they're all very nice, and they're all working to some extent, and they're really helping people along the journey. They all claim to have the truth. So I said, so if I had to talk to somebody, and I'm so aware of the deep-seated nature of this, that I'm safe when I'm in my religion, you know, I said, what is truth? So how would I define truth? And the answer I got is that truth is a process. Okay, so there are two steps here. Truth is a process. It's not a form, it's a process that conquers death.
It conquers?
Death. Truth is a process that conquers death. And I had a picture with this as well. So what does that mean? It means truth is a process that brings you back to life. So people want to say,
that I like.
So this is, people want to say this form is truth, but behind all form is a process, and that process is the dissolving of that form. If you understand, that when you link the form to the inner, to the universal, you have a conduit of continuity. That's a process. Three things are connected: the divine, your soul, and your actions are connected. So it is a fluid. There's no form in there. It's a fluid. On the day, what is required today. It's a conduit. It's a continuity. And as I said previously, no two healing sessions are the same, because this conduit of what I need to do might be something completely different from one day to the next, depending on what the client is presenting and what they need at that point. Yeah. So the difference between the argument around form is really a mental argument, and it is an attachment. So it's a mental argument in the sense that my thought forms are better than yours. But at the end of the day, they are all personal in nature, and they're all human forms. God is beyond comprehension, but you can experience it. And it is the experience of when you are with somebody who actually embodies some of this energy. What did the big masters do when they actually embodied some of this energy? Yeah, the flowers started flowering around them. Where they walked, they raised the dead from back to life. They brought the dead back to life. This is the experience where you can see, that really where this can lead to eventually, this process. So don't attach to what outcome you might like, You will be accelerated as soon as you choose to engage on this path of awakening. Your life will be accelerated, and everything will be accelerated, both the good and the bad, because your consciousness grows like this. The higher you go, the deeper you have to go. All right? The more you have to release, the more you have to release. So your consciousness just expands and becomes more exclusive, more inclusive. It can understand the patterns or the reasoning why you were specifically placed in this family, not in another. Yeah, why you were giving these skills that you brought with you from a different planet, from a different lifetime, from whom? From your source. Because this is the aspect that you are going to bring completion to. You're might not bring completion to everything, but this is your task. And that is a very solid task for this lifetime. And it will be a big task. It will engage all of you. You're not going to just give lip service, that you got to live it. Your life is probably the most honest reflection of an expression of who you are and where you're at. And where you still have doubt, and we always have doubt. Okay.
So basically what you're seeing on the outside is what's coming from the inside. Yeah. The inside gets reflected on the out. Yeah. And if you don't like it, well, time to redecorate.
It's very much so.
Hey, yeah. It's really not a problem. Take a good look and say, what is working for me, and is it making me actually happy? Am I at peace with this?
Yeah. And being playful with it.
Patient.
Yeah, and playful, We're so stuck on doing things one way. Try things a bit differently. See what you learn from it. Experiment. You're not just going to talk about it. Experiment. Try something. See if it works. If it doesn't work, well, that's feedback. That's something to do. Something different.
Well, what's wonderful? They say, if plan A doesn't work, you've got plan B. But with me, I've got the whole alphabet. And sometimes I need it. Oh, look, Senta, I've so appreciated your time today. And actually, I've learned a lot.
Okay.
I've really realized that I now, after this conversation, owe a few people some apologies, which is hard for me. Because I'm always right. Not. So it's made me look inside and be a little more self-aware.
Yeah.
So that's really what I've got out of it hugely.
Being respectful to others and where they come from, but also being respectful to yourself, and you're allowed to have a view. If you don't have a view, really You know, we express our views just to test ourselves, to get feedback. You know, it's a way of learning. So engage with it in a learning way. You don't always have to be right. Nobody's right. Yeah.
Because if you're right, then somebody else has to be wrong. And that's not how it is, because they are just having an experience, just like you are. You're an energetic being and you're experiencing. So neither's right or wrong. It's just a different experience.
Exactly. And sometimes you never know what the soul chose as its experience. You know, the hardest path must be the path of most purification in terms of gifting that it will gift you as a soul. So you know, your human view of things is more a reflection of what's going on for you than what's really going on in the world.
And you don't get golden under extreme pressure and heat. Maybe that's why we're wearing our gold today. We know what it's like to be put under extreme heat. And I'm sure there's some beautiful gold nuggets for people today. And Senta, I will leave all your details for people so that they can contact you with their questions. And as they comment under the YouTube channel, please feel free to engage with them and answer, because I won't have the answers that they require.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Jill. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome to chat.
Thank you so much. And we'll catch up again.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Lots of love. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.